Hi, my name is Vilas, and I'm going to share my experiences in building large scale dev platforms and what I call a marathon, not a sprint. So, in the last decade or 15 years of my work has been focused on developer productivity through continuous integration, continuous delivery to make sure that we have quality code in production. I was fortunate enough to get involved in chaos engineering at Netflix, and one of my passions is performance testing and analysis. Currently, I lead the developer experience team at Build.com. So let me start by sharing a developer experience goal. It is really to make sure that we empower teams to deliver what they need to deliver with quality while delighting customers. So it's a bit of a word jumble, but we'll learn more about it as we go along in this presentation. Good dev platforms, according to me, enhance innovator joy. They enable teams to deliver what is truly valuable. And by doing that, they encourage developers to use more and more of the ecosystem and thereby creating a boost in talent retention. They allow focus of the dev teams to remain on business goals while reducing churn, reducing toil, allowing them to sleep better at night. And best dev platforms are usually very measurable in terms of the return on investment, both long and short term. Organizations want ideas to be delivered into production in an easy manner. They almost think that there is some kind of magic that needs to produce this idea to go into prod. But what they don't realize is most of this magic is the platform, is the infrastructure, and the services that enable this to happen. Often, orgs have a proliferation of tools. Devs always have tools that they like, they always have build systems that they really enjoy. There is no uniform policies around onboarding. Neither are there clear strategies around when to refactor, if to refactor or not. There is a lot of duplication of effort around tools, third party software. There is more than one path to production, which is sometimes good, but in most cases, it produces security and quality gaps. So, the plan when I am focused on building a good developer experience is to do four important things. One, rationalize the existing investments in tooling, consolidate all the standards, eliminate any duplication, streamline a good strategy. And the next two, which are usually long term plans, is migration path and the retirement of legacy. Now, this is a cyclical structure, right? This life cycle starts with rationalization of software, consolidation of what is best for a dev platform, creation of a migration plan, and making sure that there is adoption from dev teams, and then finally retire out all of the legacy dev platform tools. And these platform stages are usually extremely repeatable in about 18 to 24 months. This continuously keeps happening. It's very cyclical. What have I learned not to do in my experience? Don't ignore what works today. And this is an advice I would give to others. I've definitely learned this the hard way, is to first find out what is it that works. So instead of ignoring what exists today, do regular listening sessions with the teams. Understand what is it that they have been using. Bring empathy and understand their challenges. Ask questions. Understand day to day how are things getting better, getting worse, and finally create a gap analysis that will allow you to find the key pain points that are coming in the way of developers, and then you can focus your attention on them. Don't focus on speed. Speed is usually a big enemy of quality. So if you want to make sure that you have a trade off, instead focus on reducing toil, what we talked about earlier, right? Make sure that the developers have, they see that you have a well defined strategy to deliver a good quality platform. Define a MVP, which means you have a minimum viable product that delivers value for the developer. Outline clear goals for it. Do demos often. Fail fast from the criticism that you will get. And trust me, you'll get a lot of criticism, right? Maintain transparent roadmaps. In my past life and even in my current life, it's always important to make sure that platform team goals are publicly available to be voted on, to be commented on, etc., by every other dev team. And remember that in order to run long, you have to make sure that you maintain a pace. And for that, you may have to run at a slightly slower speed. And that's why it's a marathon. Don't make it hard to use. This is something that most platform teams do as a rule, but it is something to be called out, right? You have to focus on creating an irresistible experience. It should be super hard not to use the dev tools. And that's why it's important to build tools for generic use cases first, not the niche ones. Do comparison studies, rely on acceptance testing for your own platform before you release it out. And remember that the customer is always right. Now that we've talked about what you should not do, we need to talk about what is it that seems to work. Three things, in my opinion, tracking helps. One is effectiveness, one is completeness, and the last one is stickiness. Stickiness really is a measure for adoption. How sticky is something that you're bringing along as change, how many people are adopting, etc. So let's talk about each of these. Effectiveness needs enablement. Effectiveness is really a broad term that refers to how efficiently and how well a dev team is able to deliver their product. You cannot do that unless you've given the teams the expertise that they need. You have to make sure that you measure effectiveness to understand the return investment on your platform. But you cannot measure effectiveness if you do not have a good sense of how much time is being spent in doing work today, a benchmark, and how much time is it saving once they're using new tools. In order to get the best tools, you have to prioritize ruthlessly. There will be things that are nice to have, throw them to the side, focus on your end goal, and be transparent in that. The one thing that I want to call out here is that in the race to find greater and better effectiveness, remember that these tools will not fix a bad culture. Investment in culture is separate. If you invest in culture, you will find better ways to use these tools to get you what you need. But this by itself, it will not fix culture. CI/CD is a great way to ensure that there is a clear path to prod, a good quality setup, and a really easy way that devs can do best practices. It provides high confidence to developers to say, yes, I am confident that what goes out is good quality, and they get good feedback, right? Quick feedback. Here is a very broad picture on what I consider as basic things that you need in any CI CD pipeline. So if you look from left to right, it is plan, code, verify, profile, deploy into production. And then there is monitoring systems which bring back any kind of feedback in. And all along in red, you will see the verifications or the checks or the gating criteria for each of those stages that have to be passed in order to get there. This pipeline enabling this is part of a developer platform's requirement. Completeness is not the goal. Don't focus on exhaustive applications, making sure that every single area is covered. The 80-20 rule applies. Attack the common use case first. Do not go after every single use case that's available. Exhaustive coverage takes years. Plan on quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters, and so on. And the first few quarters, goals should focus on nailing the absolute fundamentals. And when you do this, the 80-20, if you're working on the 80, make sure that the 20 is acknowledged and transparently shared. So acknowledge that you'll not be working on certain areas, so there is no setup of expectations. And make sure that your expectations are clear to every single stakeholder. Build versus buy. This is a challenging discussion and can have a presentation by itself. But my short sort of speech here will be, if you are focusing on a tool to be a business differentiator, it is always good to build something. But you have to ask yourself the question, are we going against the grain? In that case, you have to prove that going against the grain is important. But in most cases, relying on industry standards means you can get really good open source or enterprise software that's available. That also helps to build long term value. But you have to question, are we building something that tomorrow needs to be monetized, needs to be created of a differentiator within the business? That's really something that leadership can advise you on. The thing that I was mentioning with stickiness, right? You cannot get adoption unless you have great grassroots communication and the power of a community is behind it. So, honest feedback is what you need as dev platform. You have to listen to a community of users that truly cares to give you feedback. There is always going to be early adopters, right? Make sure that you involve them in roadmap planning. If you're making a build versus buy decision, guess what? They are included in that discussion, right? Make sure if there is any successes, you call everyone, you celebrate it, you do a road show, you call out your early adopters for their wins, all of that. But if there's failures, make it public as well. Make sure that you learn from it and you show how far the team has come from learning from the failure to improving things. You have to provide training and support. In most companies that I have worked in, a three-tiered support model was used. An L1 tier where it was very sort of quick and dirty FAQ solutions. Level 2 where technical depth was explored, and level 3 is where your development team or your platform team is working. You have to protect your platform team from burnout, and that's why you need the level 2 and level 1. Contribution model for onboarding always helps, where it's not the platform team alone putting in features, but others also are supporting it. Training through sensible defaults. Um, there is always a case of to be made for good platform, always encouraging good software practices. And the only way you can do this is to codify it within the platform itself. Templatized, create standard templates that will create scaffolding that always allows good logging practices, good observability, and things like that, right? Um, that provides the support that the devs need instead of them having to find this information every single time they need it. So migration itself is hard. If you think about it, right, migration usually follows like an S curve, right? This S curve it can take years. You start off slow, you have a few people using it, and then you hit this really nice hyper growth where the teams are not just using it, they're contributing to it. Maybe there are tools being built around that. And then slowly you get to the point where you have 90-95% adoption, and then at some point, someone flips the switch. This entire thing can take years for critical tools. And these timelines, the change management around it, the program management around it is crucial, critical. As long as the business needs are aligned, this S curve will always have new requirements come through within that space. So anytime you start with a platform, the platform at the start and the platform at the end are two different platforms altogether, because change is the only thing that remains constant. And remember that there is no doneness, right? So there is always, like I said, a cyclical nature of things. So there is no real doneness of migration. It is usually something that has to be measured, that has to be supported, and make sure that we are accepting all these small constraints. We focus on improvements, micro improvements, all the way to the end till the 99th percentile. And then eventually make sure that anyone who is using legacy tools also has a path to use the new tools. So, what are the takeaways from this discussion that you can implement in your own organization? Um, Dev platforms require investment and work, right? It is not something that's easy. Buying a dev platform is still hard. It's still something that's not easily doable. There is a cycle of rationalize, consolidate, migrate, and retire. And this leads to tool evolution. It leads to greater understanding of what is needed from a platform. Teams become high performing. They don't start off as that necessarily, but they become high performing through empowerment, enablement, an ability to feel confident in their delivery. Platform teams have to be empathetic to these development needs. The more they are empathetic to it, the better they can perform. And finally, building a culture of engineering excellence with good dev platforms takes years. You have to work at culture separately, and tooling separately, and then finally you can get to this point where everything is working fine. So that's really all I wanted to share. If anyone has any other questions, you can hit me up on Twitter, or you can reach out on LinkedIn, and we can definitely have a chat. But that's all I had. Thank you so much for your time today.